This is Rainy Night Horrors. Outside, the storm brews, and with it comes something darker. Every drop masks a sound, every shadow holds a shape. You're not imagining it. You're hearing the truth. Listen closely. It's already here. The echo is what lodges itself in memory. The first fall of footfalls where only silence should have reigned. Silas, that's me. My watch is kept at a cavernous depot for building materials, slumped in a decaying industrial park on the city's frayed edge. The ritual was simple. Trace the perimeter's chain-link skin, rattle the fences, confirm the finality of the main gate's lock. Nights bled one into the next, unremarkable. Entries in a logbook, notations of trivialities, the slow crawl toward dawn. Months passed under this quiet pact. Predictability was the rhythm, the solitude, a welcome cloak. I've never thrived on company, and the long hours alone were a balm, not a burden. Leaning against the gatepost, watching distant factory lights prick the darkness, I felt anchored in my own quietude. Then came the night that fractured the calm. Now, clocking in doesn't bring ease, only a low thrum of apprehension. 10 p.m. finds me arriving. The yard lights cast a sickly, insufficient glow, sketching the main gate and a slice of the gravel and concrete expanse. The warehouse itself looms, a behemoth of corrugated metal, its ceiling lost in shadow. Trucks are phantoms of the day. After 6, the place exhales into profound stillness. My command post is a cramped office near the front, home to my thermos, a heavy-duty torch, and the console displaying the camera feeds. The security system is rudimentary. A scattering of cameras monitors the loading docks and a couple of internal arteries. Their images flicker across a small, monochromatic screen. Motion sensors trip highlights on the display, usually just the spectral passage of a stray cat or a plastic sheet ghosting near a broken pane. Lately, though, those transient blips have acquired a sinister weight. The first time, the clock showed near 2 in the morning. I occupied a metal stool in the office, door ajar against the stuffy air that clings even on cooler nights. Beyond lay the warehouse's unlit belly, accessed via a long corridor leading from the office zone toward tired storage rooms. It's a desolate stretch, concrete floor underfoot, walls lined with skeletal shelves, burdened by spare parts and box towels. From that corridor, the footsteps sounded, crisp, deliberate. Instinct suggested dripping water finding a loose board, or the groan of metal contracting in the night air. But this wasn't random noise. It possessed the cadence of slow, measured walking. I rose, flashlight finding my hand. My gut clenched. A cold dew slicked the back of my neck. A scavenger, I reasoned. After copper wire, maybe tools. Such intrusions weren't unheard of out here. Stepping from the office, I thumbed the torch. Its beam sliced through the corridor's gloom, illuminating stacks of pallets, dust motes dancing in the stark white light. I advanced cautiously, gaze fixed on the corridor's vanishing point. The moment I moved closer, the footsteps ceased. "Anyone there?" My voice, too loud, absorbed by the vastness. Silence answered. I'd braced for the scuffle of retreat, a fleeting shadow ducking behind shelving. Nothing. Only the faint, incessant hum of a faraway fluorescent tube. Sweat filmed my palms, my grip on the flashlight turning slippery. Seconds stretched before I pushed deeper, probing behind crates, sweeping the light under shelves. Empty. My heart hammered against my ribs, breath ragged in the stillness. Back in the office, I scrutinized the cameras. The monitor registered a momentary shimmer on one sensor feed, a split-second anomaly. No discernible form, just a fleeting blur, then stillness. I remained tethered to the screen, waiting for a reappearance. The sensor line stayed flat. Eventually, I filed it under imagination or acoustic quirk. Yet the unease lingered, a persistent burr beneath the surface. It happened again several nights later, same dead hour. I was completing my perimeter circuit, fence line secure, loading docks quiet, and heading back toward the office. Re-entering the warehouse proper, I caught a noise, a soft scuff against concrete, like a dragging shoe. I froze, listened intently. Then the footsteps commenced again. Heavier this time, the unmistakable thud of boots. Whipping around, I threw the flashlight beam down the long corridor and saw it. A figure, dark and indistinct, standing motionless at the far end facing me. No features were visible, only a silhouette cut from the deeper shadows. The air left my lungs in a silent rush. I waited for it to bolt to challenge me. It did neither. Simply stood, a statue carved from night. My pulse became a frantic drum against my ears. My arms felt strangely distant, numb. A shout lodged in my throat, thick and useless. I forced the sound out. "Hey!" The word echoed, mocking the silence. The figure remained utterly still. I took a hesitant step forward, pinning it with the light. The shape seemed to shimmer at its edges, unstable. Blinking, I tried to refocus the beam, took perhaps 10 more paces. By the time I reached the spot where it had stood, the space was vacant. Nothing but air and dust. I swept the area frantically, checked every alcove, peered behind stacked boxes. No one. A tremor ran through my arms, a chill unrelated to the warehouse temperature. The urge to flee, to call the authorities, surged. But what report could I make? Saw a shadow. In the office, the camera playback offered only frustration. A sequence of brief flickers danced across the sensors, one after another, suggesting rapid movement from the south entrance near the docks, straight to the main hallway, somehow bypassing the camera positioned between them. But never a clear image, just interference, like electronic snow. It defied logic. I knew how animals registered, sporadic triggers. This entity tripped the sensors sequentially with impossible speed. Replaying the footage yielded no clarity. The remainder of the shift was a torment of hypervigilance. I patrolled more frequently, seeking signs of forced entry, checking locks on exterior doors. Everything remained sealed tight. As dawn bled gray light into the sky, my nerves were frayed wires. From that night, relaxation became a forgotten luxury. Each shift unfurled under a palpable sense of observation. Sounds materialized from the silence. Faint taps on metal shelving, a low rasping along unseen walls, and always the footsteps, sometimes soft, almost bare feet on the concrete. Other times, the heavy tread of boots, Leaving the relative safety of the office became an ordeal. Stepping onto the main floor felt like entering hostile territory. Flashlight held like a weapon. I scanned every corner, peered behind pallets and bins, half expecting an ambush. None ever came. No physical evidence surfaced, no forced entry, nothing pilfered. The daytime crew reported nothing amiss. I ventured a mention of the noises to a foreman, who merely shrugged, attributing it to the building's age. "All places make noises," he'd said, dismissing my concern. Eventually, I ceased mentioning it. Their reactions, the casual jokes about warehouse ghosts, the knowing chuckles, stung more than the fear itself. I attempted to chart the occurrences, seeking patterns in the footsteps, the camera flickers. None emerged, sometimes near midnight, sometimes closer to 3. Entire shifts might pass in relative quiet, though such reprieves grew rare. Sleep became fractured, haunted by the memory of that still dark shape. My daytime routines crumbled. One night, determined to exorcise the phantom with sheer diligence, I resolved to walk the entire warehouse every hour, on the hour. At 11, a full sweep, storage rooms, loading dock, the long corridor, logged, all clear. Midnight repeated the process. Still nothing. By 1 a.m., a fragile sense of control returned. Keep moving, I thought. Activity might banish the phantoms. Then, around 1:30, back in the office chair, I saw the camera feed flare. A light blipped on camera 1 near the south entrance, then instantly on camera 3, deep in the main hallway. Impossible transit, bypassing camera 2 entirely. Flashlight clenched. I bolted from the office, pulse hammering in my temples, hands unsteady. Entering the hallway, I immediately heard movement near the far corner, a quick, shuffling sound. I raced toward it, flashlight beam bouncing erratically. I caught a fleeting impression, a shoulder, perhaps, part of a back, a shape melting around the corner into the next corridor. Not an animal, not a trick of light. It looked solid, human-sized. I sprinted after it, my boots echoing on the concrete, the high metal beams seeming to vibrate overhead. Turning the corner, I faced nothing, a dead end, just stacks of plywood and lengths of metal pipe. No doors, no exits, nowhere to hide. I circled the stacks, convinced I'd cornered someone. The space remained stubbornly empty. A knot tightened low in my belly. My breath came in shallow gasps, legs suddenly weak. I braced myself against the plywood, the flashlight beam trembling in my grip. Listening hard, I heard only the frantic rhythm of my own respiration. There was no rational way anyone could have vanished from that cul-de-sac. That's when the real fear solidified. No longer just unease, but a profound, visceral terror. Tingling numbness spread through my arms. The urge to run screamed within me, but the reality of bills anchored me. I swallowed the fear, held my ground until morning. This incident I kept to myself. Explaining it felt futile, an invitation to be labeled unstable. Weeks bled into months, and the phenomena intensified. The footsteps became more frequent, sometimes sounding chillingly close, prompting me to spin around, expecting someone inches behind me. I even jury-rigged a cheap webcam in a suspected transit zone. It captured nothing definitive, only those same maddening flickers of movement, gone before they could register. Standing sentinel in a corridor, waiting, I'd feel an approach, a presence drawing near, yet never a face revealed, never a voice heard. Always this silent companion, dissolving upon confrontation. I recall one particularly restless night, pacing between office and storeroom, constantly checking my watch. Around 3 a.m., a loud clang shattered the quiet, metal pipe striking concrete. I jolted, heart leaping. The sound originated from the far end of the main warehouse floor, near stacked crates. I ran, flashlight gripped so tight my knuckles shone white. Arriving, I found a steel pipe rolling lazy circles on the floor. I traced its origin to a shelf 6 feet up. It hadn't simply fallen. Its position suggested it was dislodged. I scanned the surrounding area, desperate for any sign of movement. Stillness answered, only the pipe, slowly spinning to a halt. My breath hitched. I retrieved the pipe, replaced it on the shelf, then spent the next hour scouring every aisle, checking every door again. Nothing. Logic offers no solace here. I know only the feeling, a presence perpetually hovering just beyond sight, listening to my movements, my breathing. Turn the corner, and the space is empty. Glimpses sometimes, a shape slipping past a forklift, melting behind pallets. Always ephemeral, shadow-like. My skin prickles at its proximity. Heart pounds, throat constricts. Imagination, I tell myself. I try anchoring my thoughts to the mundane, the next paycheck, the logbook entries, post-shift plans. Then the steps return. Music from my phone offers no shield. I inevitably pause it, straining to hear over the melody. Ignoring the sounds is impossible. Each noise carries the potential threat of ambush, of malice. The cameras remain my unreliable witnesses, offering only cryptic flickers, nothing tangible to present to management. Complaining further risks my livelihood. They deem me unfit, unstable. One night, after the figure materialized again at a hallway's end, I launched a methodical search. Nearly 2 hours spent probing every recess, opening every unlocked door, bathing every shadow in flashlight glare. Behind crates, under tops, inside empty containers, behind dormant machinery. No trace of human occupation, no footprints but my own, no disturbed dust, no discarded tools. Yet, the entire time, the sensation of being watched clung to me like damp cloth. Sweat soaked through my shirt. My legs trembled. Every few steps, I glanced back, expecting that tall shape looming behind me. The silence is perhaps the worst part. Whatever this is, it makes no vocal sound. Only footsteps, the soft scrape, the occasional displaced object. No communication, no confrontation, no clear manifestation. It simply persists at the periphery, a vague form haunting the dimly lit corridors. I have no explanation, only the visceral certainty of its presence. The sick tension coiling in my gut each time I step onto the warehouse floor. I still work here. Arrive at 10, lock the gate, check the doors, settle into the small office. I burn more electricity now, keeping lights on in sections that used to stay dark. The added visibility doesn't deter the footsteps, but it slightly dilutes the feeling of utter vulnerability. Sometimes I contemplate walking away, but bills need paying, and a morbid curiosity keeps me tethered. the faint hope of capturing definitive proof, of finally understanding. Maybe that's why I stay. So far, understanding remains elusive. I possess only the fragments, the remembered stillness of that dark figure watching me before vanishing, the inexplicable movement of pipes and boxes, the camera feeds filled with digital ghosts, and the persistent physical response, the tightening chest, the prickle at the nape of my neck signaling proximity. That's the sum of it. Nothing provable, yet undeniably real to me. I make my rounds. I watch the monitors, and I wait. It hasn't caused physical harm. No theft, no breaches. Yet the tension is a constant companion. Footsteps echo where they shouldn't, and each frantic investigation yields only darkness and silence. Mornings find me leaving, with aching shoulders and a throbbing head. I return the next night, hoping for quiet that never fully arrives. The presence is always there, just out of frame, a silent testament that I am not alone in this desolate place. That's the story. I hear it, I glimpse it, I feel it. Every shift, every step through those doors. It never speaks, never shows itself, never acts decisively. It only makes me question the very foundations of my reality. But it's there. Ignoring it isn't an option. So I show up, flashlight in hand, trying to endure. This is my life now. This is all I know. That infernal bakelite box refuses silence. It persists, whether unplugged from the wall or tossed unceremoniously into a roadside gully. Somehow, inevitably, it finds its way back to its accustomed perch, whispering low static into the heavy air past midnight. This has become the rhythm of my days since returning to this place. I'd envisioned a quiet reckoning with my father Silas's old ranch, a straightforward settling of affairs, an illusion swiftly shattered. Now, this piece of obsolete junk, this tireless noisemaker, commands my attention. Arrival was a sweltering Monday afternoon, procrastination finally exhausted. Externally, time had merely deepened the ranch's weary aspect. The main house slumped, its paint peeling like sunburned skin, porch steps bowed with age. Though the roof appeared intact from below, its integrity felt dubious. Weeds, knee-high and tenacious, choked the ground around the porch, thriving in the humid heat that beaded sweat on my brow. The air hung thick with a familiar faint tang of manure and decaying hay. An olfactory ghost of a childhood I preferred remained buried. My first instinct led me barnward. Its structural soundness needed assessing. Silas had spent countless hours within those weathered walls. There, on a cluttered workbench, rested his radio. Country music, tinny and distant, had always accompanied his tinkering. No profound sentimentality attached me to the object, yet its presence stirred a peculiar unease. It seemed older, more brittle than memory served. Its plastic casing, once cream, had yellowed like old teeth. The antenna listed drunkenly. A swipe of my hand disturbed a layer of dust. The tuning dial, lodged stubbornly between stations, yielded slightly to my touch, eliciting a sharp crackle from the speaker. I traced the cord to the corner outlet and pulled the plug. Leaving it dormant on the bench, I retreated to the house. Bags dropped inside, windows thrown wide, a futile gesture against the stale, trapped air. Neglect permeated every surface. My sister, Clara, and I remained undecided on the ranch's fate. keep or sell. For now, the sorting fell to me. Furniture, garage clutter, a lifetime's accumulation. Clara, residing states away, offered support contingent on necessity. Weariness settled deep in my bones. From the cooler I'd brought, I drained half a water bottle in greedy gulps. A glance at my phone confirmed the expected. No signal. Out here, disconnection was the norm. Shrugging, I pocketed the device. That initial night draped itself in profound quiet until roughly 1 a.m. Sleep, found fitfully on the living room couch, laziness trumping the effort of preparing a proper bed, was fractured by a faint, insistent crackling. So subtle at first, I dismissed it as phantom sound, an echo in my tired mind, but listening intently revealed its nature. Static, thin as spider silk, threaded with the ghost of a country tune. Silas's station. I sat bolt upright, rubbing grit from my eyes. Moonlight cast long shadows across the darkened room. The sound emanated from outside. Perhaps I had forgotten another device. Yet, the memory of unplugging the radio in the barn was sharp, certain. Barefoot, I crossed the threshold onto damp grass, my heart accelerating its rhythm. Toward the barn I walked, sliding the heavy door open just enough to slip through. The overhead bulb remained stubbornly dark. My phone's flashlight cut a nervous beam through the gloom. There it sat on the workbench, its dial faintly luminous, the needle twitching erratically. Low static hissed from its speaker. My gaze darted to the outlet. The cord lay coiled beside it, its prongs gathering dust, innocent of any current. A difficult swallow. Residual charge, I reasoned. Some quirk of capacitors I didn't understand. Panic held at bay for now. Lifting the radio, I twisted the volume knob until it clicked definitively off. Silence descended. Replacing it on the bench, a tremor in my hand, I secured the barn door. Back in the house, locks bolted, I willed myself towards sleep. Morning arrived with a crick in my neck and an ache across my back, souvenirs from the couch. After a rudimentary breakfast, I headed for the barn, needing confirmation. Silence greeted me. The radio sat inert, unplugged. I seized it, carried it outside with grim purpose, and dropped it into the rusted belly of an old trash bin. Repair was not an option. Nocturnal static held no appeal. My day was claimed by practicalities, purging the house of clutter, inspecting fence lines. Boxes yielded old photographs, forgotten papers, the detritus of a life lived by a man disinclined toward sentiment. Later, seeking connection, I drove miles down the rutted track to a rise known for its grudging cell reception. Clara's voice came through, distant but clear. I outlined my plan to stay a few more days. She agreed readily, then asked casually if anything felt off. Hesitation flickered. Then the words tumbled out. The radio, the unplugged static. Had she visited, moved anything? Confusion colored her denial. Probably nothing, I conceded, ending the call with a disquietude that lingered. Returning to the ranch, a knot of dread tightened in my stomach as I approached the barn. Peering inside confirmed my fear. There, mocking my efforts from the scarred planks of the workbench, sat the radio. Same dust film, same skewed antenna. I stared, tapped its casing, lifted it. The knob turned. Static bloomed. I silenced it again, hands now distinctly unsteady. Frustration warred with disbelief. How could a discarded object reappear? Leaving the barn, I secured the door with a heavy, antiquated padlock. It clicked shut with satisfying finality. I yanked the door twice, testing its hold. The remainder of the day was a forced march through chores, sweeping, bagging trash, preparing a solitary meal. Yet, my thoughts orbited relentlessly around the radio. Had I mistaken the bin? Confused locations. Stress, I told myself. Loneliness playing tricks. Midnight found me preparing for sleep in my old childhood room, a lamp cast in a small circle of light against the encroaching darkness. And then, precisely at 1, it began anew. The low hiss of static, a spectral melody woven within. I sat up, heart hammering against my ribs. Ignore it, I thought. Wait for it to cease. But it persisted. A faint, tenacious sound. The barn was locked. Could there be another? Pants pulled on, flashlight gripped tight. A swig of water for a suddenly parched throat. I went outside. The padlock gleamed dully in the flashlight beam, securely fastened. Pressing my face close to a gap between the weathered boards, I saw it, a weak internal glow emanating from the workbench. The static seemed louder here, a sibilant whisper against the wood. Sweat prickled my neck. Fumbling fingers worked the lock. It sprang open. I eased the door inward. The radio's light pulsed softly. Beneath the static, a country tune unfolded. Slow, unfamiliar, the vocals garbled and distant, unlike any broadcast I knew. Stepping inside, flashlight beam pinned to the source, my pulse roared in my ears. As I approached, the crackle intensified, then dipped, as if acknowledging my presence. My hand reached out, turned the knob. Click. Silence. Again. I carried it outside this time, locking the barn behind me. Near the back of the property lay Silas's old fire pit, a circle of scorched earth used for burning yard debris. I placed the radio on the ground. Feeling absurd, yet driven, I fetched a hammer from a nearby toolbox. I brought it down. Once, twice, a satisfying crunch of plastic yielding, the speaker popping loose, the dial skittering our way. Adrenaline surged. Dropping the hammer, I gathered the fractured pieces and tossed them into the coal pit. No kindling yet, but tomorrow. Fire. Wiping my brow, the extremity of my action struck me, yet the thought of seeing it whole again was unbearable. Inside, I washed my hands, exhaustion finally claiming me. Early light pulled me from sleep, the fire pit foremost in my mind. I hurried out, empty, utterly barren. No shattered plastic, no stray wires, no metallic glint. I circled the pit, scanning the dirt for signs of animal scavenging, finding nothing. A constricting band tightened around my chest. Back to the barn, and there it was, on the bench, immaculate, whole. Not a crack marred its yellowed shell. The antenna canted at its usual angle. Breathing heavily, stomach churning, I felt a profound chill despite the warming sun. Hesitantly, I touched its surface. Cold. I turned the knob. Static erupted. Clicked it off. Backing away, I locked the barn door, the gesture feeling utterly futile now, and retreated to the house, seeking equilibrium. Clara's voice, again crackling over the poor connection. I know this sounds insane, I began, recounting the smashing, the empty pit, the radio's impossible restoration. Her questions were gentle, probing. Was I sleeping? Eating properly? Perhaps exhaustion. Perhaps I'd smashed something else. Hallucinating? A flare of anger, quickly doused with apology. The call ended, leaving me adrift in frustration, utterly alone with this inexplicable thing. I walked the property lines, needing the grounding rhythm of physical labor, checked fences, noted repairs needed, considered pranks. Neighbors? Impossible. The nearest lived a mile off, an old man unlikely to engage in such elaborate, pointless tricks. That night, I waited in the brightly lit kitchen, coffee growing cold beside me. Sleep tugged at my eyelids near midnight, but I fought it. 1 o'clock. The static returned, punctual as tide, soft as a sigh from the darkness outside. Through the kitchen window, the barn stood silent, dark, yet I knew. Inside, the noise persisted. My heart thumped a heavy, reluctant beat. I remained seated, breathing deliberately, slowly. Then rising, flashlight in hand, I stepped outside. Cool grass beneath my boots, the scent of damp earth in the air. At the barn door, I listened. The static whispered its secrets. This time, I didn't unlock it. I simply stood there, thoughts fragmented, a desperate yearning for silence, for normalcy, warring with a creeping dread. After a long moment, I turned back to the house, shut the door. Sleep evaded me, my mind circling the impossible physics of the self-powering, self-repairing radio. A dull ache throbbed behind my eyes. Dawn was breaking before exhaustion finally pulled me under. Morning. A final check of the barn. Quiet. The radio sat, placid, ordinary in the daylight. I stared at it, a long, assessing look, then turned away. Enough. I began packing, stuffing clothes and essentials into my truck with hurried, decisive movements. Before driving off, I paused before the barn door, padlock glinting. Should I try again? Do something else? No. I left it locked. As the truck rumbled down the dusty track, a tightness gripped my throat. Leaving the ranch felt like a retreat, not a resolution. That radio remained, humming its static lullaby after midnight, an anomaly I couldn't explain or conquer. The highway beckoned, a ribbon of asphalt promising distance, if not peace. Far behind me, nestled in the quiet decay of Silas's barn, the radio waited. I assume it still crackles nightly. Clara could hire someone, deal with it herself. My tolerance was spent. I wouldn't spend another night alone on that property, listening. That's why I left. That's why returning feels unthinkable. For 2 years, my apartment has shared a boundary with the city's sprawling necropolis, a high concrete partition, the only concession between my living space and that quiet dominion of the dead. Does it trouble me? Friends invariably ask. Initially, a shrug sufficed. No, not really. Night carried faint vocal murmurs from beyond the wall, easily dismissed. Late mourners, perhaps, or grounds crew tidying the plots under moonlight. Then came the less explicable acoustics. Low, conspiratorial laughter at unholy hours, soft moans adrift on the still air when no ceremony could possibly be underway. The disquiet began subtly, until one morning a desiccated bloom lay upon my balcony floor. How it arrived remained a mystery. As I reached to discard it, the flower, brittle and cold, dissolved into fine, cinereous dust within my grasp. That was the moment normalcy fractured. My residence occupies the second tier of a 5-story structure, its modest balcony affording a direct prospect of the cemetery barrier. By day, the view holds little menace. The distant drone of a mower signifies Mr. Silas, the caretaker tending the lawns. Crows occasionally punctuate the wall's stark line. Through the grand wrought iron gates at the entrance, visitors drift in and out. Sunlight paints a scene of tranquil repose. Nightfall, however, redraws the landscape. Often, ensconced in my living room, lights extinguished for the glow of a screen or the pages of a book, I'd perceive speech from the other side. Indistinct, low-pitched mutterings. My rational mind clung to explanations, lingering relatives paying respects, an elderly watchman making rounds. Yet other sounds defied such logic. A chuckle, sometimes, brief, breathless, as if hastily suppressed, devoid of mirth. And worse, a protracted, languorous moan that tightened the skin across my scalp. A sound not of agony, but of something fundamentally wrong. Raising hackles with an unnerving resonance I struggle to articulate. The first tangible proof that something was truly amiss manifested about a month ago. Emerging onto the balcony one dawn, I discovered a wilted rose resting in a small, inexplicable puddle near my patio chair. The air was dry. No rain had fallen. No footprints marred the dew. No scuff marks suggested a climber. That wall stands nearly 8 feet tall. Scaling it seemed both difficult and pointless. I stooped to retrieve the rose, intending to bin it. The stem felt shockingly frigid, an unnatural chill like preserved ice. Carrying it towards the kitchen disposal, I opened my hand, only for the bloom to instantaneously collapse into a drift of pale gray powder. I recoiled, startled, scattering the ash across the linoleum. Sweeping it up, wiping the floor, I noted the absence of any scent. It was merely dust, inert. The image, though, lingered, an unsettling watermark on my thoughts. That evening found me seated on the sofa, gaze fixed on the impassive wall, listening. The usual faint susurrations drifted over, too ephemeral to decipher. Sleep proved elusive. Around midnight, a sharp burst of masculine laughter sliced through the quiet. It ceased the instant I rose from bed to investigate. Peering through the window into the obsidian dark, I saw only the wall's crest and the skeletal silhouettes of trees beyond, the cemetery grounds hidden by the angle. Perhaps loiterers on the public path outside, I reasoned, retreating to my sheets. In the ensuing week, the nocturnal disturbances intensified. Sleep became fragmented, punctuated by awakenings around 2 or 3 in the morning. Sometimes laughter echoed, other times a solitary moan hung in the air. Once, a distinct whisper brushed the edge of hearing, unintelligible, yet disturbingly close, as if uttered directly against the far side of the concrete partition, aimed towards my building. Each time, courage propelled me onto the balcony to listen more intently. An abrupt, profound silence descended. One night, resolved to capture evidence, I ventured out, phone poised to record. Apartment plunged into darkness. Glass door slid ajar. I stood exposed on the small platform. For 10 minutes, I held the device aloft, capturing the ambient hum of the city, the rustle of wind through unseen leaves, and perhaps 1 or 2 fleeting, ambiguous noises. Later, headphones pressed tight, heart thrumming a nervous rhythm, I scrutinized the playback. A faint, breathy exhalation seemed caught in the digital silence. So faint, it could easily have been static, an artifact of the recording itself. Frustrated, I vowed a more direct approach. Next time, I would try to see. The main cemetery gate, however, was secured after 6 each evening. Trespassing felt wrong, and approaching the caretaker with tales of spectral sounds seemed absurd. "Excuse me, I hear eerie noises nightly. Mind if I patrol your graveyard?" Ludicrous. Still, encountering Mr. Silas during daylight hours, I casually inquired about late shifts, nighttime burials, or vigils. He chuckled, shaking his head. "Closed to the public at dusk," he confirmed, and he himself was usually gone by 7. No reports of intruders, though he conceded teenagers sometimes hopped the walls. Mischief makers he'd never personally apprehended. This offered a sliver of rationalization. Pranksters. Maybe they left the flowers. The thought provided a temporary balm, and I resolved to simply keep watch, perhaps startle some errant youths if they became disruptive. But the offerings continued. Withered daisies appeared, then a single white lily marred by brown decay spots. Once, a small cluster of crushed leaves, seemingly torn from some verdant houseplant, lay forlornly on the concrete. Each discovery shared the same unsettling signature, an unnatural coldness upon contact, followed by immediate disintegration into ash when handled for disposal. Always in the morning, never witnessed arriving. I'd retire, awaken, step outside, and find a new morbid token awaiting me. Determined to unmask the perpetrator, I installed a compact motion-activated camera near the balcony door, angled to survey the space. Linked to my phone, it promised alerts upon detecting movement. 2 nights passed uneventfully. On the 3rd, I awoke near 4, instinctively checking my phone. No notifications. Relief washed over me as I drifted back to sleep. Yet morning light revealed a wilted chrysanthemum nestled beneath my chair. A jolt, sharp and cold, shot through me. I accessed the camera footage immediately. Nothing. The recording showed only my own egress onto the balcony before bed, and my reappearance that morning. Between those 2 points, empty space. Then, suddenly, the flower was present, materializing without trigger or explanation. An insidious unease began to permeate my evenings. Crossing the living room after dark, my eyes invariably strayed to the glass balcony door, half expecting a visage to coalesce in the reflection. My skin grew clammy at unexpected sounds. My pulse quickened. The refrigerator's hum, the gurgle of pipes within the walls. Mundane noises now seemed fraught with potential menace. I existed on a knife edge of alertness. Roughly a week passed. I surfaced again in the dead hours, around 2:30 a.m. The air possessed a chill that defied the season, sinking into my bones despite the thermostat reading a comfortable 71 degrees. I shivered, though slick with a cold sweat. Then the laughter returned, faint, muffled, yet sustained this time, stretching for perhaps a full minute, seeming to emanate from just beyond my window. I sat bolt upright, breath held, waiting for the camera alert that never came. Clutching a flashlight from the nightstand, I crept through the darkened apartment, easing the balcony door open just enough to peer out. A faint scraping noise reached me, the drag of something coarse against the far side of the wall. I swept the flashlight beam across my small domain. Nothing. Leaning cautiously over the railing, I probed the darkness below, trying to glimpse the wall's base. Futile. My gaze lifted to the wall's summit. For an instant, a flicker of movement, a shadow deeper than the rest. A branch swaying? A knot of dread tightened in my stomach. Retreat seemed the only sane option. I slid the door shut, secured the lock, double-checked the windows, and forced myself back to bed. Morning inspection of the balcony revealed nothing amiss. No flowers, no ash, no prints. Clean. Yet, kneeling near the railing, I noticed a small patch of dust, darker than the usual city grime. Touching it yielded a gritty texture, like fine sand. Odorless, it dispersed with a gentle puff of breath. Its origin remained elusive. The subsequent days blurred into a pattern of sleep deprivation. I forced myself awake late, listening, watching, finally succumbing to exhaustion near one, only to rise haggard for work. Colleagues remarked on my frayed nerves, my distracted air. Had something happened? Just neighbor noise, I mumbled, omitting the crucial, unsettling detail of its origin. 2 nights ago, I resolved to confront the darkness directly. Donning a hoodie against the night air, phone in pocket, I dragged a chair onto the balcony, extinguishing all interior lights to blend into the shadows. Around 1 a.m., the scraping sound returned, hesitant at first, then more distinct. It was accompanied by a low hum, an unidentifiable, meandering tune that rose and fell before fading into silence. My palms grew slick, my mouth arid. Heart hammering against my ribs, I leaned over the railing once more, thumbing the small flashlight on. For a fleeting, heart-stopping second, I saw it, or thought I saw it. Fingers, pale and distinct, gripping the top edge of the wall. They vanished instantly, retracting into the unseen territory beyond, leaving me questioning my own senses. Nausea surged. The flashlight nearly slipped from my trembling grasp. Scrambling back inside, I slammed the door, fumbling with the lock. Minutes passed in suffocating silence before the frantic pounding in my chest subsided enough for rational thought. I retreated to the bedroom, lying rigid, staring at the ceiling until oblivion claimed me. Morning brought the familiar emptiness. No flower, no dust, no trace. The camera remained stubbornly silent. Now, I exist in a state of perpetual apprehension. The laughter, the moans, the ephemeral, ash-bound flowers, they defy explanation. Moving seems the logical course, yet my lease binds me for months more, and spectral disturbances hardly constitute grounds for breaking contract. My well-being, however, feels increasingly precarious. Each nightfall brings a renewed tension, a waiting game. I cannot definitively name the source of these intrusions. Pranksters? Auditory hallucinations born of proximity and suggestion? Or something else, something that bleeds through the barrier between the living and the supposedly silent dead? Certainty eludes me. All I know are the sounds no one can account for, the objects appearing on my balcony as if by conjuration. Something stirs beside that wall, something that feels intrinsically wrong. Sleep offers little respite. I am perpetually tense, startled by the mundane click of the hallway elevator. Trapped beside a cemetery that refuses to adhere to its quiet reputation, I feel perpetually observed after sunset. My balcony faces the graveyard, an unavoidable vista. Every time I close my eyes, I anticipate the rasp of hidden laughter, brace for the discovery of another dead bloom come morning. Stepping outside, the wall asserts its presence, a silent monolith guarding its secrets. Will familiarity ever breed contempt, or only deeper fear? For now, I wait, listening to the silence, acutely aware of its fragility, never knowing when the next inexplicable sound will break it. No photograph, I once believed, could truly curdle the blood. No patch of quiet earth could make the bones hum with dread when darkness descended. And certainly, no forgotten well could compel me to distrust the testimony of my own eyes. Yet, 2 days passed, halting my car beside that crumbling stone circle choked with moss, all those assumptions shattered. What follows is the unvarnished truth. What I witnessed, what resonated in my ears, what clawed its way into my gut. No artistry, no embellishment, just the sequence of events, exactly as they unfolded from my arrival to this disquieting present. I was navigating a serpentine back road, the kind that unravels miles from anywhere significant. My quest, unusual landscapes for a personal photography series. My camera rested on the passenger seat, spare batteries nestled in a bag at my feet, a thermos of lukewarm coffee beside me. Emptiness defined the route. No homesteads, no barns, an utter absence of human imprint for what felt like an age. Then, a small weather-beaten sign emerged from the roadside tangle, its cracked paint whispering, "Sallow Bend." I braked. A dirt track, scarcely more than a suggestion, vanished into a thicket of towering skeletal trees. With the sun sinking behind me, painting the sky in bruised colors, I sensed potential in the late afternoon light. I parked beside a fence whose timbers sagged with ancient weariness, riddled, no doubt, by generations of termites. It encircled a broad, neglected field. Far across it stood a small, derelict house, a listing stable, and a sprawling, overgrown garden where grasses surged waist-high and weeds strangled dormant structures. Near the stable, a colossal oak leaned precariously, its posture one of imminent collapse. Silence reigned, save for the incessant thrum of unseen insects. No breeze stirred, no birdsong broke the quiet. Hoisting myself over the decaying fence, I slung the camera strap around my neck and ventured forth. The air hung heavy, damp, smelling intensely of wet earth and decaying wood. With each step, my boots made sucking sounds in the yielding mud. Before the stable yawned an old well, a squat cylinder of heavy, age-darkened stones. Verdant moss clung thick as velvet to its upper lip. A derelict pulley mechanism, rusted and broken, canted above it, its frayed rope coiled like a dead serpent on the damp earth. An instinct, primal and insistent, whispered that this was the shot. The dying sun struck it obliquely, bathing it in a light that felt both golden and leprous. I lifted my camera, framing the eerie composition, capturing the well's brooding presence from several perspectives. Drawn closer, compelled to capture the intricate tapestry of the moss, I reached out. The stones felt slick, greasy. The moss yielded damply beneath my touch. Curiosity overriding caution, I leaned over the well's precipice, peering into its depths. Utter blackness swallowed the light. A cold, subterranean draft breathed upwards, carrying the scent of stagnant water and something else, something metallic, like old blood. I stood frozen for a beat, and then I heard it, a susurrus, faint as exhaled breath through clenched teeth. My first thought, wind whistling through fissures in the stone, but no breeze touched my face. And then, unmistakably, woven into that soft sigh, I heard my own name whispered, just once. A knot tightened in my stomach. I recoiled, nearly dropping the camera, listening intently, straining my ears against this sudden, profound silence. Nothing. A frantic scan of the surroundings revealed only emptiness. Confusion washed over me, cold and disorienting. My phone confirmed my isolation. 0 signal bars. It had to be the wind, I reasoned, an acoustic trick of the well's cavity. But conviction demanded proof. Decision made, I switched the camera to video mode. Leaning precariously over the dark moor once more, I extended my arm, pointing the lens straight down into the void. My objective: capture any sound emanating from below. Record pressed. I held my breath, trying to still the tremor in my hands. Tension coiled tight across my shoulders. The chill persisted, a phantom breath on my nape. A minute stretched thin. Enough, I decided. As I began to retract the camera, pulling it from the Stygian depths, a flicker caught the lens. A reflection, swift, ephemeral. A face, but emphatically not my own. The bare suggestion of eyes wrongly spaced. A mouth stretched open. A silent O of suffocation or supplication. I snatched the camera back, fumbling, the metal casing cold against my suddenly slick palms. Heart hammering like a trapped bird against my ribs, I switched off the recording, gasping for air. I glanced at the screen, bracing for a glitch, an odd flare. But before I could press play, the display flickered violently and died. Turning the camera over to inspect the lens, I froze. The glass was marred by scratches, not on the smooth outer surface, but inside. Jagged, deep gouges radiated across the internal elements, as if something sharp had clawed at it from within. Disbelief warred with rising nausea. I ran a finger over the exterior. Flawless. The damage was internal, inexplicable, like microscopic vandalism performed from inside the sealed lens assembly. My mind scrambled for logic and found none. A wave of sickness crested. I spun around, scanning the desolate yard again. Empty. Then, from the well, a low, wet, shifting sound, like something heavy displacing water. I jumped, startled. Clutching the camera like a talisman, I turned my back on the well and strode, muscles rigid, towards the car, casting frequent glances over my shoulder. The well remained silent. The stable stood vacant. The distant house stared back with boarded-up eyes. Escape was paramount, yet the sun had nearly vanished. Twilight bled across the land. I'd lingered longer than I'd realized. Near the stable, unnoticed before, stood a small, hand-painted sign advertising lodging, the last hearth. Perhaps I'd missed a turnoff. Back in the car, I drove perhaps another mile down the winding road and found the farmhouse indicated. A tall, gaunt man with mud caked thick on his boots emerged. Elias, he introduced himself, confirming he had a room available. I paid in cash, accepting the heavy iron key. The well, the whisper, the reflection. I kept them locked inside. Who would believe such a tale? My assigned room smelled of dust and damp, but exhaustion overrode fastidiousness. I locked the door, kicked off my mud-caked boots, and collapsed onto the bed. My jeans felt clammy. My back throbbed. One more attempt with the camera. It remained stubbornly inert. The battery indicator had shown half full. That wasn't the issue. Plugging it into the charger yielded nothing, not even the faintest blink from the power light. A surge of impotent anger rose. That camera represented a significant investment. Determined to understand the damage, I carefully unscrewed the lens. The rear element confirmed the internal violation. More scratches, deeper here. They formed a patternless, chaotic spiral, rough lines intersecting with savage randomness. Touching them gently with a lens cloth confirmed their location, sealed within the glass, unreachable. Setting the ruined equipment aside, I forced myself to breathe. The clock on the wall showed 9. Muffled sounds drifted from elsewhere in the farmhouse. Elias moving about, perhaps tending to animals, securing the property for the night. Rubbing my tired eyes, I opened the window, seeking fresh air. The darkness outside was absolute, punctuated by a single distant light, a porch lamp, perhaps, or a beacon from the stable complex I'd fled. The air carried the promise of rain. A shower seemed necessary, a ritual cleansing. In the small, attached bathroom, the water pressure was feeble, the heat inconsistent. As I rinsed shampoo from my hair, my hands trembled uncontrollably. The reflected face swam in my mind's eye, those distorted eyes, the gaping mouth, twisted, wrong. Remembering the whisper sent a fresh wave of cold down my spine. Clean clothes, a small wooden desk. I tried cleaning the lens again, a futile exercise. Then, a sound scraped against the silence outside, not dripping precisely, but heavier, wetter, followed by a soft friction, like damp canvas dragged across wood. My jaw locked. Toward the window, I crept, peering into the inkwell night. Nothing stirred, until the sound repeated, closer now, to my right, near the house's corner. A viscous, slithering noise. Something was ascending the wall, keeping the room's lights extinguished for stealth. I waited for my vision to adapt. A smear against the siding, darker than the night itself, resolved near the eaves, elongated, perhaps several feet across, clinging. My breath hitched. Pressing my face to the cool glass, I strained to see. The shape seemed to undulate at its edges. A glistening trail marked its path upwards, catching the faint moonlight like snail slime. Was it limb, face, form? Impossible to discern. Just a clot of animate darkness hauling itself skyward. I stumbled back from the window, my throat papery dry, heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I checked the door lock again, a useless gesture against such amorphous dread. My phone remained lifeless, switching on its flashlight app only through glare back from the window pane. Opening it was unthinkable. I stood rooted, listening. Silence descended again. Then a faint scraping from above, on the roof. A soft thump, as if something heavy shifted its weight on the shingles. I swallowed, the sound loud in the quiet room. Should I cry out for Elias? No, not yet. Not without certainty. My legs felt like water. A cold sweat broke out despite the room's chill. A reconnaissance mission. I eased the door open. The hallway stretched before me, dimly lit by a single lamp at its far end. Floorboards groaned under my cautious weight. I moved toward the main living area, ears straining for any sound from the roof. Silence. The front door was bolted, windows secured. Peering through a pane, facing the drive revealed only Elias's parked truck and the dark silhouettes of trees. No monstrous shapes, no unnatural movement. Standing there, chest tight with indecision, I heard Elias humming softly from another room, likely the kitchen. Drawn by the sound of normalcy, I found him there. He nodded a greeting, his expression neutral. "Everything all right?" he asked. The urge to babble about climbing slime warred with the fear of sounding unhinged. "Are there large animals around here?" I managed. "Ones that climb onto roofs." He regarded me with mild confusion, then shook his head. "Maybe a stray cat. Raccoon sometimes. Nothing bigger than that." I nodded mutely, thanked him, and retreated to my room. Back within its musty confines, I scanned the walls, the ceiling. No damp patches, no dripping residue. The window remained closed, curtains drawn. Flipping on the overhead light felt like a small victory against the encroaching dark. I lingered by the window, listening. Stillness. No scraping, no whispers from forgotten wells. Perhaps exhaustion had conjured the shape, but the well, the face, the impossible scratches etched inside my camera, those remained stubbornly real. One final check, flashlight in hand, breath held tight. I opened the bedroom door again. The hallway was unchanged. I navigated to the back door, unlatched it, and stepped onto the porch. The night air hit me, cold and smelling of damp grass. I swept the flashlight beam across the farmhouse walls. Nothing. Aimed it towards the roof. Empty. I circled around to the side where I thought I'd seen the shape. My light found the siding and froze. Thin, dark streaks marred the wood, trailing upwards towards the roofline. They looked sickeningly fresh. Glistening droplets still clung to them, slowly sliding downwards. My stomach clenched. Reaching out a hesitant finger, I touched one. Thick, frigid, carrying a faint, stale odor. Revulsion crawled over my skin. Wiping my finger frantically on my jeans, I backed away, a knot of ice forming in my gut. I wanted to shout for Elias, show him this proof, but instinct held me back. Stepping forward again, I tried to follow the streak's trajectory onto the roof, but the angle was impossible. My imagination supplied horrific possibilities. A flicker of movement at the edge of my vision made me whip the flashlight around. Nothing. Just the oppressive dark. My pulse thundered in my ears. A mosquito whined near my face. I flinched violently, almost dropping the light. Enough. Back inside, bolt slammed home. I dragged a chair and jammed it under the doorknob. Then I sat on the bed, back pressed hard against the headboard, clutching my camera bag like a shield. Sleep was a distant country. My mind replayed the well scene on a loop. The reflection, the sound, the lens violated from within. And now, this cold, wet thing scaling the farmhouse walls. Fitful sleep finally claimed me around 4 a.m. Sunlight, slicing through cracks in the curtains, woke me. My body ached with residual tension. A cautious peek outside confirmed the streaks remained, now dried to dark, ugly scars on the siding. I packed with frantic speed, needing only escape. Settling the bill with Elias, I offered no explanation, showed him no damaged lens. Departure was the only imperative. As I pulled away, a final glance at the farmhouse cemented the image. Those dark lines climbing the wall, ascending to the roof, vanishing into the ordinary morning light. Now, miles down the highway, I drive towards the city, towards noise and light, putting as much distance as possible between myself and Sallow Bend. At a sterile rest stop, I tried the camera one last time. Dead. Utterly unresponsive. The scratches remain tiny, claw-like engravings on the inner glass. The face in the well haunts me, that fleeting reflection that stared back, alien and distorted. This account is plain, unadorned. There is no neat conclusion, no logical key. I possess only the raw data of sight and sensation, the physical evidence of a ruined lens. My plan involves repair shops, perhaps a new lens entirely. But the thought of leaning over another well, particularly in some forsaken corner of the world, fills me with a visceral dread. And when I close my eyes, the image surfaces, a slow, wet shape dragging itself up a wall in the dark, leaving cold trails in its wake. I hate that the memory clings. I hate that I cannot prove it. But I saw it. I heard it. And the inside of my camera bears its inexplicable signature. A month has dissolved since I took possession of this eyrie, nestled high within the skeletal remains of some forgotten factory. The low rent beckoned, as did the cavernous space, ample enough for the tools of my trade. My landlord, a man of few words, had mentioned the building's centerpiece, a spiral staircase, an artifact from its industrial genesis decades prior. A quaint detail, I thought then, preoccupied with mere shelter. Now, I cursed my curiosity, wishing I'd pressed him on its history, particularly its nocturnal aspect. My loft occupies the third floor. The staircase, a helix of corroded iron and groaning timber, corkscrews through the building's heart, ascending from the ground level to the sixth. My initial climb acquainted me with its peculiarities, the unnervingly narrow treads, the sharp, protesting shriek each footfall elicited, less the gentle creak of age, more a strained wooden agony. The iron railing, perpetually cold, offered a frigid grip even under the midday sun. Flaking paint, like sunburnt skin, adorned the surrounding walls, releasing a faint, persistent odor of petrified dampness. Neglected, yes, but undeniably solid. I furnished the space sparsely, a bed tucked into one corner, a simple work table positioned near the vast windows, a sofa angled towards the entrance. Immense ceilings soared overhead, matched by equally large windows that bathed the loft in generous daylight, rendering everything benign. But nightfall brought a profound stillness. My neighbors were phantoms, their presence unfelt, unheard. Street noise evaporated after 10. Occasionally, the building's ancient circulatory system, its pipes, would hum a low threnody within the walls. Otherwise, silence reigned, a heavy, unsettling blanket, particularly as midnight approached. My habits lean nocturnal. Work or digital distractions often keep me tethered to the screen late into the night. Sometimes, a craving necessitates a pilgrimage to the lobby's vending machine. It was during one such descent, around the first hour past midnight, that the staircase revealed its stranger nature. Reaching the landing, I peered down the central void, a dizzying aperture offering a view straight to the ground floor. A single, dim bulb overhead struggled against the gloom, casting peculiar, elongated shadows. Within the core, something shifted, a mobile darkness where no figure stood. I leaned further, scanning the levels below for a source, a person whose movement might explain the phenomenon. The stairwell was empty. A trick of the light, I reasoned. The old wiring, the flickering bulbs, my own eyes adjusting to the low illumination. I dismissed it and continued downward. Each step groaned its familiar complaint beneath my weight. My own breath sounded unnaturally loud, shallow in the quiet. Glancing again into the central abyss, I saw the shadow undulate. It seemed to pulse subtly, a silent systole-diastole that felt unnervingly synchronized with a frantic drummer in my own chest. A knot tightened somewhere deep inside me. Wiping a sudden film of sweat from my brow, I quickened my pace to the ground floor, snatched a snack from the humming machine, and scurried back upwards. In the days that followed, I tried to banish the memory, yet an inescapable feeling of being observed clung to me whenever I used the stairs. The creaks began to adopt a rhythmic cadence, echoing my pulse, raising gooseflesh along my arms. I considered the alternative, the ancient freight elevator, a rattling metal cage prone to jarring halts between floors. One harrowing ride convinced me the staircase, despite its disquieting aura, was the less perilous option. Perhaps a week later, another late-night hunger stirred. It was nearing 2 a.m. The building slept its deep, silent sleep. I pulled open my door and approached the stairwell entrance. Opening that door, however, unleashed an immediate sense of wrongness. The corridor light was extinguished. Only a weak glimmer bled down from the floor above, sketching the spiral railing in faint relief. My heart hammered against my ribs as I placed a foot on the uppermost step. The wood screamed. Looking down, I saw it, the shadow, undeniably present and seemingly larger. Ignore it, I commanded myself. One foot after the other, hand clamped onto the cold iron, navigating the near darkness. Each step resonated louder than before. My breathing grew ragged. The entire structure felt as though it vibrated, tuned to the frantic rhythm within my own body. Halfway down, another glance into the core confirmed the shape was not static. It trembled, quivered. I blinked hard, trying to clear my vision, but the tenebrous form persisted. My palms grew slick, my stomach coiled tight. I forced myself onward. Reaching the lobby brought a wave of relief so potent it felt physical. It had to be imagination, I insisted. I collected my snack, then paused, contemplating the ascent. Waiting for dawn seemed appealing, yet the prospect of sleeping on a lobby bench was worse. I began the climb. My shoes made dull thuds on the treads. My throat was parchment dry. I clutched the railing again, the icy metal biting into my fingertips. This time, the shadow seemed animated, swaying in the central void. When I paused, it seemed to react, a subtle shift in its density, almost like it acknowledged my hesitation. A strange, magnetic pull emanated from the core. My heart pounded violently. Swallowing hard, I focused solely on reaching my landing. Breath escaped me in short, sharp gasps. Sweat traced cold paths down my temples. Every stair groaned, the sound echoing upwards through the spiral's hollow center. The shadow deepened, intensified. A tremor started in my legs, threatening to buckle them, but sheer will propelled me forward. Back inside my loft, collar soaked, chest painfully tight, I slammed the door, locked it, and sagged against the wood, gasping for air. It took long minutes for my breathing to steady. I kept peering through the peephole, half expecting some formless dread to manifest on the other side. Nothing appeared. Eventually, exhaustion claimed me, pulling me into dreams where I stood frozen on those steps, the wood groaning like a monstrous heartbeat beneath my feet. I awoke at dawn, profoundly shaken. The following day, I deliberately descended the stairs in full daylight. The ascent felt different, mundane. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating the space. The central void was just that, an empty space, shadowed naturally by the structure itself. No pulsing darkness, no sinister presence. Perhaps I was merely susceptible to the building's aged eccentricities, my own mind conjuring fears from mundane shadows. I made a point of using the stairs more frequently during the afternoon. Trips for groceries, taking out refuse. It felt ordinary. Other tenants passed, murmuring greetings, oblivious. Daylight rendered it harmless, but night invariably transformed it. The familiar tension coiled in my chest as dusk bled into evening. By 11:30 p.m., the thought of needing anything downstairs became a source of low-grade anxiety. I began foregoing late snacks simply to avoid the passage. Avoidance, however, isn't a permanent solution. A few days later, laundry called around midnight. The machines resided in the basement, and the elevator, predictably, was out of service. No choice remained. Hoisting my laundry bag, I took a fortifying breath and opened my door. The hallway lights flickered erratically. Stepping into the stairwell enclosure, I was met by the weak glow of a single bulb on my landing. The court below was a well of darkness, disturbed only by shifting, ambiguous shadows. Was something truly moving? Or was it merely the unreliable bulb playing tricks? Gripping the railing, I started down. With each step, the groan returned, perfectly synchronized with my accelerating pulse. A physical pressure bore down on my chest. My arms tingled. I felt each individual hair rise. Reaching the basement level, I hurried towards the laundry room's cold, musty air. The washing machines hummed their monotonous tune. I loaded my clothes, then stood, surveying the quiet concrete corridor. Pacing helped slow my breathing. This was absurd, I told myself. Fear of a shadow. I hadn't seen anything tangible, heard no footsteps but my own, no voices, only that disquieting shape in the stairwell's heart. The wash cycle completed, I transferred the damp clothes to a dryer and resumed my vigil. The steady drone of the machine was almost soothing, yet the thought of the climb back up sent tendrils of anxiety tightening around my chest again. Finally, clothes dry and bagged, I stood at the foot of the staircase, looking up. The spiral loomed, vanishing into the upper darkness. Feeble bulbs on each floor cast insufficient light, barely illuminating the treads. My foot met the bottom step. It creaked. I froze. My heartbeat hammered in my ears. Clamping my hand onto the railing, I recoiled. The metal felt colder than ever, like touching ice. Another step, then another. Each impact, each groan, mirrored the frantic pulse in my chest. Dizziness washed over me. Slowly, deliberately, I ascended. Passing the second floor, I risked a glance into the center. The shadow was immense, larger than ever before, a dark, fluttering entity. My throat constricted. My entire body tensed. Flight screamed through my mind, but the fear of tripping on the narrow, dark steps kept me locked in a steady, forced climb. Ascending towards the third floor, the shadow seemed to writhe more violently. A dull pressure bloomed behind my eyes. Reaching my landing felt like breaching the surface after being held underwater. I was gasping, pulse hammering visibly in my neck, skin clammy. Fumbling with keys, I burst into my loft, dropped the laundry, and leaned heavily against the closed door, trying to regain control. My heart felt bruised from its frantic rhythm. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face, hands trembling. My reflection stared back, haggard, eyes shadowed. The thought of a sleeping pill surfaced, but a deeper instinct urged alertness. Another week bled away, the pattern solidifying. Any nocturnal stairwell transit involved the shadow. Each encounter left it seeming larger, more defined. The feeling of being watched intensified, not by eyes, but by an oppressive, focused awareness. The tightness in my chest became an immediate precursor to opening the stairwell door. The creaking steps felt sentient, the vibrations underfoot more pronounced, as if the entire spiral structure breathed in time with my fear. One night, deep into the small hours, around 3 a.m., a clattering from the hallway, pipes perhaps protesting their age, roused me. Curiosity overriding caution, I opened my door and moved towards the stairwell. The instant I pushed open that door, my heart leaped. The space felt preternaturally dark, despite the single functioning bulb. The air hung thick, heavy, resisting each inhalation. Sweat beaded on my palms. A strange numbness crept into my arms. I looked over the railing. The central void pulsed, filled with the undulating shape, shifting in slow, deliberate waves. Then I heard it. The wood creaked, a distinct groan, though I hadn't yet set foot upon the stairs. It was as if the staircase itself stirred. My heart pounded with sickening force. I feared I might faint. Gripping the railing for support, I watched the shadow drift, not just pulse, but ascend slightly, drawing nearer. My head swam, legs threatening to betray me. I stumbled backward, eyes fixed on the coalescing darkness, then slammed the stairwell door shut, retreating into my loft, fumbling with the lock. The remainder of the night passed in sleepless vigil. Curled on the couch, knees drawn up, I focused on steadying my breath. The frantic pounding in my chest gradually subsided, replaced by a persistent internal chill. Sleep finally claimed me near dawn. Waking to bright sunlight, the building felt innocuous again. I resolved to inspect the stairwell thoroughly in the daylight. Around noon, I ventured out. Bright, airy, the spiral looked perfectly ordinary. The central void held only expected shadows. I walked all the way down and back up without incident. No strange sounds, no pulsing dread. For a moment, I almost convinced myself it was all delusion. But that night, the familiar dread returned. A dripping faucet in the bathroom demanded attention, requiring tools from my car. The elevator remained stubbornly inert. Around 1:30 a.m., I stood before the stairwell door. The moment I opened it, the deep, resonant groan echoed upwards. My pulse surged. Hesitating at the top step, I forced myself to look down. The shadow was there, vaster than I had ever witnessed it, seeming to fill the entire central gap. Panic clawed at my throat. My breathing hitched, shallow and fast. My eyes stung, but the tools were necessary. I began the descent, eyes fixed rigidly on the steps immediately ahead. My hand, slick with sweat, trembled on the cold railing. Each plank groaned its protest under my weight. The air felt thick, viscous, carrying a stale, dusty odor. Against my will, my gaze flickered towards the center every few steps. The shadow rippled, its movement eerily mirroring the frantic rhythm in my chest. Step by agonizing step, I descended. By the time I reached the ground floor, my legs were quivering uncontrollably. My chest felt crushed, my shirt clinging damply to my skin. I gasped for air through my mouth, my nose seemingly useless. Bursting through the building's main entrance, I retrieved my toolkit, then stood frozen, staring back at the lobby door. A pull, an insistent urging, emanated from within, beckoning me back to the spiral. Steeling myself, I pushed back inside. The lobby was deserted, silent. I looked up the towering helix. It seemed to recede into profound darkness overhead, despite the scattered lights on each landing. My pulse throbbed, a heavy beat against my throat. Swallowing against the dryness, I placed my foot on the bottom step. The wood groaned. A tremor ran up my spine. My chest felt fit to burst. My knuckles ached from gripping the railing. As I climbed, the creaking intensified, the smell of old dust filling my nostrils. Nausea churned in my stomach. The urge to stop, to simply sit down on the steps, was overwhelming, yet the need to escape that space propelled me upward. Passing the second floor, the shadow flickered violently. A wave of sickness washed over me. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. My vision momentarily blurred. One foot, then the other. A desperate, mechanical rhythm. Finally, the third floor landing. I stumbled across the threshold, fumbled the key into the lock, slipped inside, and slammed the door shut. I collapsed onto the sofa, toolkit falling from my nerveless fingers. Breath tore through my lungs in ragged gasps. A deep ache settled into my limbs. My pulse pounded in my temples. I sat there for a long time, the dripping faucet forgotten, too shaken to move. A chilling certainty settled then. Whatever resided in the heart of that spiral staircase was growing, feeding somehow on my perception of it. Whether it existed solely in my mind or held some objective reality, I couldn't say. All I knew was that with every nocturnal passage, the pull intensified. The wood beneath my feet vibrated with a life not its own, like being trapped within the workings of some vast unseen heart, and the terrifying conviction grew stronger. One night, I might descend those steps and find myself unable to climb back up. Heavier than mere cardboard had any right to be. The box groaned, its hidden contents slithering against each other as I wrestled it from the highest shelf's dusty grip. Professor Alistair Finch's office, a labyrinthine accretion of bound volumes, curious relics, and steel cabinets overflowing with forgotten paperwork, nonetheless seemed to possess a focal point. This singular container. It bore no label, no hint of provenance, only thick strata of packing tape, brittle and ambered by the passage of years. A tremor, unrelated to the physical exertion, traced its way up my spine the moment I settled the box onto the scarred expanse of his desk. Something felt trespassed, a threshold crossed into knowledge, best left undisturbed. I am Alara Vance, graduate student, temporary custodian of this academic sanctum, and, as of this moment, unwilling archaeologist excavating a mystery I never sought. It began with innocuous simplicity. Professor Finch, my dissertation guide, off to a symposium in some storied European city needed someone to tend his wilting spider plant and retrieve the post. Water the flora, collect the mail, he'd instructed, keys pressed into my palm with an abstracted air. And Alara, if the spirit moves you, perhaps impose a modicum of order on my office. He'd neglected to mention that office was a euphemism for a minor library cross-pollinated with a cabinet of curiosities, subsequently detonated. Days I'd spent adrift in that paper sea, navigating drifts of monographs, charting archipelagos of correspondence, attempting to wrest structure from glorious entropy, and then the box. Hesitation. My fingers hovered above the fossilized tape. This errand exceeded the brief. Logically, I should hoist it back to its shadowed perch, erase its existence from my short-term memory. But curiosity, that insidious whisper, that magnetic north of the soul, wouldn't be denied. Before reason could reassert itself, I snatched a tarnished letter opener from the desk's clutter, its edge biting cleanly through the aged adhesive. A sigh of trapped time, thick with the scent of decaying paper and leather, escaped the newly opened flaps. Inside lay a trove, notebooks, their covers softened by handling, pages the color of weak tea. Photographs slipped between them like pressed flowers, brittle newspaper clippings, and documents stamped with official seals, all whispering of decades past. I lifted the uppermost journal. The leather, worn smooth, yielded beneath my touch. Flipping it open revealed Professor Finch's distinctive, angular script, instantly familiar. Yet the date inscribed at the page's head, 1987, arrested me. Finch would have been scarcely more than a boy then, barely out of his own undergraduate years. Reading, the cluttered room dissolved. The insistent ticking of the mantel clock faded. The distant hum of city life receded, swallowed whole by a narrative that strained credulity. The journal chronicled Finch's inaugural anthropological venture, a raw expedition deep into the Amazonian vastness. He pursued whispers, ethnographic rumors of an uncontacted tribe possessing abilities that defied conventional understanding. What he documented, however, fractured the very bedrock of the rational. He wrote of a people who conversed without sound, whose touch could knit flesh, whose intuition bordered on prescience. Initial entries radiated academic skepticism, a quest for logical frameworks, but the weight of observation accumulated, page by page, forcing a confrontation with the utterly inexplicable. My pulse quickened as I turned the brittle pages. Sepia photographs captured figures adorned with intricate markings that seemed to phosphoresce in the jungle's perpetual twilight. Meticulous botanical sketches depicted flora unknown to any taxonomy, annotated with notes on their purported transcendental qualities. Accounts of ceremonies unfolded, rituals that appeared to casually disregard the known laws of physics. But the narrative arc began to curve downwards. Enthusiasm bled into apprehension, discovery curdled into dread. The final entries were terse, the penmanship hurried, almost illegible with panic. Finch spoke of shadows that clung too close, of uncanny accidents plaguing his camp, phenomena laced with a terrifying deliberateness. The very last page broke off mid-thought, a stark, unfinished sentence hanging in the void, I lowered the notebook, my own hands unsteady. A fiction, surely. Elaborate world building, perhaps. Notes for some speculative novel. Yet sifting through the box's remaining contents painted a far more disquieting canvas. Official seeming reports, swaths of text obscured by thick black ink, still yielded chilling fragments. Specimens secured, and manifesting anomalous capabilities. Newsprint fragments screamed headlines about the inexplicable vanishing of an entire indigenous community in that precise region of the Amazon, and the photographs, grainy, motion blurred, yet undeniably depicting forms that owed more to nightmare than nature, figures distorted as if seen through troubled water. A cold synthesis began to form in my mind. If this record held even a kernel of truth, Professor Finch hadn't just stumbled upon an anthropological marvel. He'd unearthed something potent, something dangerous. A secret, powerful entities would move mountains or people to keep buried. Why retain such damning evidence? Why leave it accessible, however inadvertently? The answer struck with the force of a physical blow. He intended it to be found. Not negligence, but contingency. A dead man's switch. Should anything befall him, the truth would surface. As if summoned by the thought, my phone vibrated against the desk. An unfamiliar number. The text message glowed starkly. Return it. See nothing. For your own good. Ice sluiced through my veins. My gaze darted wildly around the room, searching the mullioned windows for watching eyes. Nothing. Only the tranquil facade of the university town, drowsing in the afternoon sun. Prudence screamed retreat. Seal the box. Hoist it back. Feign ignorance. But the hook was set too deep. The enigma was too vast. Its potential implications world-altering. If Finch's impossible discovery was real, it could rewrite the very definition of human potential. Trembling fingers fumbled with my phone. Photograph everything. Notebook pages, cryptic documents, spectral images, a frantic digital backup, uploading each file to encrypted cloud storage as swiftly as my shaking hands allowed. Whatever storm was breaking, a record would endure. My mind raced, a frantic counterpart to my actions. Who sent the warning? How could they possibly know? And Finch, was the conference merely a convenient fiction, a pretext for flight? Consumed, I nearly missed it. The distinct cadence of footsteps approaching down the corridor. Heavy, deliberate, halting directly outside the office door. A metallic jingle, keys turning in the lock. My heart hammered against my ribs. Panic flared. I scrambled, shoving the contents haphazardly back into the cardboard maw, heedless of order. The flaps were barely closed when the door swung inward. Two figures stood silhouetted against the hallway light, men in severe dark suits, their faces impassive, radiating an unnerving competence. Not campus security. Definitely not. One advanced, his hand dipping inside his jacket. "Miss Vance?" His voice was level, devoid of inflection. "We need you to accompany us." I recoiled, mind spinning. My name? How? What did they want? The questions were rhetorical. The answers resonated with chilling clarity. They were here for the box, for the secrets it guarded. I don't know what you mean, I stammered, striving for composure I didn't possess. Professor Finch just asked me to water his plants. The man's expression remained unchanged, carved from stone. Let's not complicate matters. We merely have some inquiries regarding your recent findings. My eyes flickered towards the window. Second floor. A survivable drop? If I could just reach it. He anticipated the thought, moving with startling agility to intercept any path to escape. That would be ill-advised, Miss Vance. No one intends you harm. A conversation is all we require. But his eyes betrayed the lie. Conversation was the furthest thing from their objective. Whatever truths lay dormant in that box, these men were the instruments of its eternal silence. In that instant, resolve crystallized. This couldn't end with quiet disappearance, with truth suffocated. Fueled by a surge of pure adrenaline, I seized the heavy box and flung it bodily towards them. In the fleeting moment of their startled reaction, I bolted past, bursting into the corridor. I ran, faster than I knew I could, feet pounding down the echoing stairwell, out through the heavy oak doors and into the indifferent afternoon air. Shouts pursued me, the thud of heavy shoes gaining, but I didn't dare look back. I ran, propelled by terror and a burgeoning, terrifying purpose, away from the cloistered campus and into the anonymity of the town's bustling streets. Gasping for breath in the shadowed recess of an alleyway, the reality struck. My ordinary life had just detonated. I was entangled, irrevocably, in a narrative woven across decades and continents, a mystery far larger and more perilous than I could comprehend. The box was gone, but the images, the knowledge, they were mine. A choice loomed. Oblivion, attempt to reintegrate into the mundane, pretend the office, the box, the men, never happened, or pursuit, follow the breadcrumbs Alistair Finch had scattered, unearth the truth, regardless of the price. Distant sirens wailed, growing closer. A sleek black sedan cruised slowly down the adjacent street, its tinted windows opaque, searching. The choice was made. This wasn't an ending. It was an ignition point. The true peril, the real journey, lay ahead. Casting a final glance towards the university building, the mausoleum of my former existence, I turned and melted into the urban labyrinth. Whatever came next, I would see it through. For Finch, for the silenced tribe, for the staggering secret that whispered the potential to reshape the world. The hammer of sunlight struck my skull the moment I stepped onto that desolate expanse. Even breathing felt like inhaling dust, the desert air utterly still, vacuumed of life. My transport, a battered jeep driven by two taciturn locals, had already become a shimmering mirage on the horizon, leaving me beside a low dune bleeding into weathered rock. A tremor of anticipation ran through me. Whispers of primordial remnants, undisturbed for millennia, had drawn me across continents. My name is Elias Thorne, an independent scholar chasing the ghosts of antiquity, and my mind hummed with the possibilities. Crumbling walls, perhaps. Pottery shards, certainly. Nothing prepared me for the uncanny architecture of the dread that awaited. A structure whose memory still casts long shadows over my waking thoughts. Near the skeletal remains of a half-swallowed edifice, I laid out my instruments. Much was familiar archaeological detritus, fractured ramparts, faint etchings swallowed by erosion, the scatter of what might once have been a roof. But as my trowel scraped sand from the eastern flank, it struck something solid. The lip of a descending passage, a fissure in the expected. No survey, no map hinted at subterranean construction here. Nalin, I brushed away the grit. Steps carved from an obsidian dark stone I couldn't immediately place, plunged downwards, perfectly preserved. My pulse leapt. Fetching my torch, I cast its beam into the opening, but the darkness drank the light, revealing only the steep pitch of the descent, swallowing all sense of depth. I hammered a stake deep into the resistant earth, looped one end of my climbing rope securely, and began the climb down, the other end clutched tight. Each footfall on the alien stone echoed, a hollow percussion in the sudden cool. Deeper, the wall swam into view, and I halted. Inscriptions, not glyphs born of Egypt or Sumer, but something wholly other, unsettling geometries that whispered of unknown minds. A local variation, I reasoned initially, yet the fluid lines and stark angles defied every linguistic pattern I knew. More disquieting still was the spectral luminescence they emitted under my torchlight. Not a reflection, but a captured light, a cold fire that seemed to writhe at the edges of the symbols. My hand hovered near, seeking warmth, vibration. Nothing, only cool, impassive stone. My breath hitched. A primal instinct screamed retreat, yet the scholar in me, the fool in me, pushed onward. The staircase coiled, the passage constricting until my shoulders grazed the walls, dislodging flakes of stone that skidded into the abyss below. The stagnant air acquired a peculiar tang, metallic, laced with something like damp earth, though its origin remained elusive. Then, at a turn, an echo bloomed, distant, rhythmic, like a vestigial chant caught in the stone's memory. It swelled, then receded. I extinguished my torch, plunging myself into absolute black. Silence rushed in, but beneath it, my straining ears detected a faint cadence, a pulse like slow, measured breathing that wasn't my own. Ice traced patterns on my skin, my jaw locked. Air currents, I told myself. Acoustic anomalies. Liar. The torch flickered back to life, and I forced my legs to move. Deeper still, a motif began to repeat on the walls. A human face, rendered utterly blank. Where eyes, nose, and mouth should have been, there was only smooth, undisturbed stone. A negation carved in stone. It appeared every few meters, varying in scale, but constant in its chilling emptiness. My stomach churned with a nausea unrelated to the descent. Guardian figures, protective wards. No known iconography offered solace. My palms grew slick. I wiped them uselessly on my trousers, the visceral dread clinging like the metallic scent in the air. Abruptly, the descent ceased. The steps gave way to a level floor of the same dark stone. Simultaneously, my torch beam began to stutter, the light faltering. I rapped the casing, fresh batteries that morning, but the lumen pulsed erratically, casting frantic shadows. In their dance, I glimpsed movement from the corner of my eye. A flinch, a turn, the beam spearing the spot. Only stone. Only another featureless visage staring sightlessly back. A nervous laugh escaped my lips, tight and dry, doing nothing to loosen the knot tightening in my gut. A few more paces, and the passage opened into a vast chamber. My wavering light revealed a vaulted ceiling, supported by immense pillars. The space felt cavernous, yet strangely empty. Stone pedestals stood scattered like forgotten thoughts, but they bore no statues, no relics. Then I saw the inscriptions cloaking the pillars, elaborate variations of the script from the stairwell, some lines sharp, as if newly incised, others worn smooth by ages. An oppressive weight settled on me, the air itself thick as sediment. And then the chant returned, a susurrus caught beneath the threshold of hearing, yet seemingly closer now, woven into the very fabric of the stone around me. I stepped towards the chamber's heart, sweeping the beam across the floor. There, etched into the stone, was a colossal circular design, a swirling vortex of lines converging into the shape of that same null mosque. A pressure built in my chest, an invisible hand shoving me back. Stepping onto that sigil felt like an irrevocable transgression. My heart hammered against my ribs. Sweat dripped from my brow. Enough. I had seen enough. Alone, with a failing light and burgeoning terror, further exploration felt suicidal. Turning, I began to trek back, the sensation of unseen eyes boring into my spine undeniable. The ascent proved punishingly difficult. My lungs burned with the musty air. My muscles screamed as if I'd journeyed for days, not hours. That phantom chant seemed to follow, sometimes behind me, sometimes inside my own skull. At every turn, I risked a glance back, half expecting a form to detach itself from the darkness. Only the relentless repetition of the eyeless, mouthless face met my gaze. Emerging into the late afternoon glare felt like surfacing from a drowning depth. The sun stung, blinding me momentarily. My campsite, a quarter-mile distant, beckoned like a sanctuary. Relief surged with each step away from that subterranean maw. Yet, later, as I tried to prepare a simple meal, my hands refused to still. My heart galloped. My mouth was parchment. Water helped little. A protein bar tasted of ash. I forced it down, attributing the lingering shock to fatigue and the sheer oddity of the find. Sleep claimed me on my cot, fully clothed, only to violently eject me near midnight. I sat bolt upright, heart pounding, unsure what had pierced my slumber. Then, splinters of imagery flashed behind my eyes. Not dreams, but waking visions. An obsidian hall stretched before me, lined with statues of figures devoid of faces. They weren't entirely still. A subtle twist of a head here, a minute shift of a shoulder there, always just outside my direct focus. My chest constricted. Sweat bloomed cold on my forehead. The confines of the tent became suffocating. I scrambled outside into the cool desert night. Only stars and silent dunes met my eyes, but the afterimage lingered, burned onto my retinas. Sleep offered no refuge for the remainder of the night. Brief lapses into unconsciousness were shattered by jolting awakenings, each accompanied by the faceless figures drawing nearer, their silent presence more terrifying than any scream. In one particularly vivid sequence, I stood again in the chamber, the swirling sigil beneath my feet, the statues forming a tightening circle. Leaning inwards, waiting, breathless, I felt the air grow thin. Until dawn, I paced, checking equipment, desperate for distraction. the knot of fear lodged immovably in my gut. The following dawn, departure was not a choice, but a necessity. I broke camp with frantic efficiency, threw my gear into the Jeep, and drove, pushing the vehicle hard across the desolate track towards the nearest town. The journey itself was fraught. Shapes flickered at the edge of my vision, and the rearview mirror seemed to capture fleeting movements in the empty back seat. By the time I stumbled into a nondescript hotel, I was drenched in sweat, nausea churning. Checking in, I craved normalcy, sought refuge in the mundane. Research, I decided. Local legends, obscure historical records, anything to contextualize the underground anomaly. Yet each time I opened my laptop, the blank visage materialized in my mind's eye, the faint echo of the chant vibrating just beneath my hearing. I'd slammed the lid shut, head in hands, wrestling for control over my own breathing, my shoulders perpetually locked in tension, my neck stiff as if braced for a blow. Eating was mechanical, hydration a chore. My body felt coiled, perpetually crouched in that subterranean darkness. In the subsequent week, I attempted a return to routine. Calls to colleagues yielded little. Most dismissed the faceless imagery as unknown. A few expressed cautious intrigue, but offered no answers. The nights intensified. The hall of statues became a recurring landscape in my mind, now accompanied by phantom sensations. A cold draft on my skin despite sealed windows, the persistent, insidious chant. My heart would race, fingers gripping the bedsheets, my breath catching in ragged gasps, limbs tingling with adrenaline. Then, the phenomena bled into daylight. Shadows pooled unnaturally in my apartment hallway, seeming to writhe. Doors resisted opening, their hinges groaning with a cadence disturbingly reminiscent of the chant. My phone would buzz, only to offer dead air or, worse, the faint, distant sound of rhythmic breathing. Once, gazing from my window into the night, I saw it, a silhouette on the street below, utterly featureless, seemingly staring directly up at my window. I blinked, and it vanished. Psychological trauma, I desperately told myself. An overreaction to an eerie discovery, but the intrusions felt too real, too persistent. The vision sharpened daily. The statues appeared peripherally in my own living room, dissolving the instant I turned to confront them, leaving only a pounding heart and trembling hands. The gurgle of the shower drain mimicked the chant's low thrum, forcing me to cut the water, standing dripping and tense, straining to hear. My mind felt frayed, splitting at the seams, yet the fear was undeniably corporeal. Eventually, the realization dawned, cold and unwelcome. The visions weren't mere echoes. They were summons. They wanted me back. The faceless figures crowded closer each night, pressing in on my sleeping form. The unique metallic, mossy odor from the tunnel would fill my nostrils inexplicably. I'd wake soaked in sweat, eyes darting to the shadowed corners, expecting a void stare effigy to solidify. Fumbling for the lamp offered only momentary reprieve before a flicker at the edge of the light suggested something receding. Panic attacks ambushed me in broad daylight, concentration shattered. Trying to read old expedition notes, the letters themselves would seem to coalesce momentarily into that blank mask before scattering again. My heart felt bruised from constant pounding. Living like this was impossible. The pressure inside my skull, became a constant, vice-like grip. So, the decision was made, less a choice than a surrender. I repacked my gear, booked a flight, resolved to return. One last time, I told myself, to investigate thoroughly. Perhaps a missed clue, an artifact demanding removal or destruction. Logic offered no purchase, but desperation had eroded its foundations. My nights were sieges, my days were haunted. Confrontation felt like the only path, however perilous. Now, I sit in a sterile motel room miles from anywhere, the road outside leading back towards that sun-scorched void. My hands vibrate as I write this. A knot occupies my stomach. The air conditioning hums, but I keep the window latched. The desert winds moan outside, scrapes too close to the memory of that subterranean echo. My equipment lies ready. Torch, spare batteries, rope, camera. My phone, loaded with tracking apps, feels like a useless talisman against the profound isolation awaiting me. First light is my deadline. Stumbling upon that sight in darkness is unthinkable. Already, my pulse drums a frantic rhythm. My shoulders ache. Images of those null masks flicker behind my eyes, waiting, turning their smooth, featureless heads as I approach. My breath catches with each intrusive thought, yet the compulsion remains absolute. Escape seems possible only by re-entering the source of the terror. This creeping certainty settles over me. Descending again means encountering phenomena beyond explanation. The chant might solidify into audible words. The walls themselves might ripple. Rationality has fled. I crave only cessation, release from this waking nightmare. I need to stand before those faceless things, stare into their blankness, and discover if severance is possible. Tomorrow, I drive back. Tomorrow, I descend those steps. Tomorrow, I face the emptiness in that chamber. The thought sends shivers down my spine, yet inaction guarantees a lifetime of flinching at shadows. My life feels suspended, trapped between my world and theirs, awake or asleep. I don't expect answers, perhaps not even survival, as I currently understand it. But I must try. Returning might worsen everything. Part of me knows, senses, that this is precisely their desire. They want me back in their domain, and I'm going. This place feels less like a ruin and more like a lure, something ancient and aware that snagged me and refuses to let go. No dramatic showdown awaits, perhaps. Just me, stepping back into the darkness, beneath the swirling sigil, surrounded by silent watchers, to see what resides there, or perhaps to be seen. If I emerge, if the Elias thorn who descends is the same one who climbs out, maybe then this haunting will cease. I am ready, or rather, I am committed, irrespective of the tremor in my limbs, the dryness in my mouth, the frantic race of my heart. I scan the corners of this cheap room, half expecting a statue to stand sentinel in the shadows. Nothing. Just four walls, a buzzing fluorescent light, and the ragged edges of my resolve. Tomorrow will reveal whether release exists down that passage. If not, then at least the flight ends here. I will walk back into that stone gullet and learn what waits for me soon enough.